I'm William Brent of Power for All. Today, we're speaking with Aaron Leopold, Chief Executive Officer of the Africa Minigrid Developers Association, also known as AMDA, which is working to build out reliable market information and policy guidance for governments on how to affordably and reliably build out Africa's future energy system. Thanks for joining us, Aaron.
Thank you, Will.
So we're speaking to an audience that knows quite a bit about mini grids. I'm sure they're interested in understanding why AMDA was created.
Yeah, so AMDA was created, or the idea for AMDA was created about 2 years ago at a World Bank SMAP meeting in Nairobi, where developers and donors were in the room saying, we want to do business together. The donors wanted to invest, and of course the mini-grid developers needed investment. But at that time, the donors were saying there are too few projects, and the developers were saying, we have great projects. But there was a mismatch in the financial expectations, in the type of financing that was available, and really there was a lack of clarity around what the mini-grids were really offering. They were saying, well, we can electrify a village. Well, at what service level, at what reliability, at what cost, how much of that needs to be grant, when can they expect repayment? And the answer was different for every single site. So there was no benchmark available. There was no baseline for which either side could really work from in terms of expectations of returns, or on the developer side in terms of building up an expectation of what their sector could deliver. And so the need for data transparency and just a lot more data in order to create those benchmarks was really seen as one of the key answers. And of course, in East Africa at the time, there was a lot of policy redesign happening, and the mini-grid companies didn't, and in many cases still don't feel like they are really represented in the policymaking processes for their own sector. So that was a long answer, but the short version is that AMDA was created because there are terrible issues in getting finance to where these funds have said they want to spend their money. They're unable to spend it. And the policymakers are kind of designing policy in the dark many times.
So it's if I can summarize, it's a trade association of mini grid developers, private sector primarily.
Yeah, thanks. That's an important clarification that I should have made. So the membership requirement are that you have an existing site as a private sector developer. We're still sort of defining whether you need to be private sector or whether you need to be profitable. And the idea is that the association is supposed to be made up of developers who are looking to scale. And the other requirements are around data sharing. You cannot be an AMDA member without sharing a list of about 40 different KPIs on quality of connection, on where your financing comes from, on reliability of the systems, etc. And you also have to be designing systems that are in line with national regulations, because the purpose of AMDA is really to legitimize the mini-grid sector as a integral part of the future energy system of Africa. And that means following regulations so that we are being seen as taking seriously, and that we are automatically going to fit in the plans of the future.
Got it. And so you talked about two key audiences, investors / funders, as well as policymakers, which I also would imagine include regulators. What do you see as AMDA's main role vis-a-vis those audiences?
Yeah, so I've spoken more...
Or partners, maybe, not audiences, right?
Yeah. Well, it's going to be both, depending on how receptive the counterpart is. But yeah, I've spoken a lot more about the money side of things, so I'll start with the policy. We have 17 founding members, and we are rapidly looking to grow the membership.
And those founding members are in Tanzania and Kenya, right?
Tanzania, Kenya, and Nigeria. Yeah. And we are rapidly looking to expand those numbers to A, get the baseline of our benchmarking data broadened out, but B, to be able to start working in more countries with more governments on policy and regulatory design and redesign. We want to have members covering all of sub-Saharan Africa in three years' time. But by the end of this year, we're looking to have members in about 12 to 14 countries. We will have, hopefully, after our first round of fundraising is successfully completed, which we are working on now, we will have offices or at least staff in 3 to 4 countries within the next 9 months or so. And those countries are going to be the 3 that I just mentioned: Tanzania, Kenya, Nigeria, probably Zambia, or potentially DRC or Mali. We're talking with many different people from existing industry associations on how we can work together to maybe not require full-time staff, but where we can really, be the information source and the advocacy support for existing associations as well.
Mm-hmm. And so on policy and finance, what does that advocacy look like? What are those goals that you're trying to achieve?
Well, it's different for each country. If you look at Mali as an example, they've got 20 years of history and a really great group of developers there, and they probably won't need much assistance at all. But then if you look at DRC, where we have some mini-grid operators functioning in large towns, because even in those types of communities there's no electricity, and where the regulation isn't as clear cut, it's going to look very different in those 2 contexts. And in Nigeria, they have very advanced, probably the best regulation for mini-grids on the books, but it hasn't really been implemented yet. And so there it's going to be more about monitoring implementation and holding government and donors to account on their commitments and to be transparent in their approvals, etc. So it will be inherently about building up the right environment for mini-grids to grow. Yeah. And that's, again, going to be different in each place, and will require different skill sets from each of our advocates there.
So the International Energy Agency has said that up to 200,000 mini-grids are required to potentially serve a customer base of more than 400 million people. Those are huge numbers. So I'm curious, from AMDA's perspective, and given what you've already talked about, what does success look like for you in helping to achieve some of those potential targets?
Yeah, for us, success is really providing the foundational platform, the policy platform, and the market awareness and intelligence that's needed for financiers and decision makers to enable these companies to do their jobs. And at the moment, we're fighting very hard for increases in finance, but also just to unlock the already committed finance that has not been spent in the mini-grid space. Over $1 billion have been committed by various donors and concessional lenders to the mini-grid space, and only a small percentage, less than 10% of that, has actually been spent. So we have 900 million just waiting. And I think success for us looks like a very, very clear and not automated, but very smooth process for getting that money out the door, either through payments per connection or results-based financing, as it's called, or a pathway towards cost-reflective tariffs in rural areas. So that may be subsidized kilowatt-hour prices, or that may be national plans for tariff harmonization or cross-subsidization between utilities and mini-grid companies. And for those listening, rolling your eyes at that idea, that's what we're all about, is big thinking and big ideas and having complicated conversations. We were just at a meeting, Will, you and I are still together at that location, where we heard about a new idea coming up to really build out opportunities to create strategic partnerships between utilities, mini-grid companies, solar home system companies, where that cross-subsidization process would be at the center of this partnership, to deliver better services, to expand services at an affordable price. Well, neither the utility nor the solar home system companies nor the mini-grid companies can do that on their own. And they certainly can't do that universally. So it's fundamental that these types of changes and these types of plans are starting to form.
Point of clarification, you talked about cross-subsidies and harmonization between utilities and mini-grids.
Yeah.
Are mini-grids utilities?
Yes. Well, you've actually made me. You've drawn me into a trap because I've been misnaming my own sector for a while. At AMDA, we really want to move away from calling the companies mini-grid companies. Mini-grids are the technologies. They're the product that these companies are rolling out. What they really are is rural utilities. They are providing energy services. They are, installing poles and wires just like a big utility, but they operate primarily in rural areas, and we're calling them decentralized utilities or rural utilities. And thanks for that clarification.
Sure. And then so just go back to what sort of success looks like. What are the first steps to achieve that success, say, for the rest of 2018, early 2019?
Well, once we're fully operational, which is the funding question internally, the first couple of steps are really building out the data that we have already collected from our members and building up further data to create a transparent, publicly available platform that will be on our website and available through partners that really allows people to take the data that we already have collected, which is for over 100 sites, and to start playing with it. What are the averages? What are the highs? What are the lows? What type of difference does it make where you are within the African continent? We have Nigeria, which is a vastly different market where different economies of scales are possible at different speeds than in East Africa, which is much less densely populated and where distances between markets are much greater. So we want people to start looking at this baseline that we're building and to start using it. And we are talking already with a number of action research-oriented organizations, including research institutes, universities, other industry associations to figure out how we can collaborate on data gathering. And this is where we really see our first important movements as being.
Great. And then since this is, we're talking about the broader ecosystem, and this will be included in the Minigrid Partnership newsletter, can you talk a little bit about what AMDA's role is within the Minigrid Partnership?
Sure. So I'm on the steering committee of the Minigrid Partnership, and I've been involved since its very beginnings when it was called the High Impact Opportunity, when I worked for Practical Action. This was part of SE for All at the time. And it's been interesting to see it evolve because it's a multi-stakeholder group, which inherently makes it difficult to find one activity that everyone is happy with. But I think right now the exciting thing is that the partnership wants to build a kind of a regular state of the market assessment or report or activity of some kind. We're still defining it, but AMDA is really helping the partnership think through, how the partnership can add most value to these folks who want to be working more with mini-grids but haven't found their own way. So we think really providing this transparency on what the mini-grid sector or the rural utility sector can and can't do, and at what cost, etc. And the exciting thing is that AMDA's data is showing that it can do more than people expect at lower costs than people expect, and that we are seeing economies of scale cost reductions already, even though it's still such a small sector. So feeding this type of information and perspective of the developers into the Minigrid Partnership has been really fundamental because for so long, because there are so few mini-grids, a lot of the conversation has been somehow theoretical. Like you were saying, the IEA predicts. Well, AMDA is all about let's let people predict, but here's what's really happening. And I think that's the value that we're trying to bring in. This reminder of the people who have got the boots on the ground.
It sounds very exciting, Aaron. Thanks for being available for this conversation. And for those who are interested in contacting AMDA or learning more about AMDA, their website is africamda.org. And we'll look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Yes, thank you so much, William.